Unpacking My Library, a talk about book collecting, Walter Benjamin, 1931. I read this the other night, and I've been putting it off because I couldn't find the time. Whenever I did sit down to read it, one of my kids would start talking to me, and I would say, hey, I need to read this. It's kind of dense. It's somebody who I need to be able to focus in order to read this. I can't just be interrupted by it. So finally got around to reading it, and there are 5 quotes that I pulled out of here that I think are really worth thinking about. So I'm just going to start here. He mentions books. He was a book collector. But I'd like you to think about this in terms.
I just want to say I'm sitting here emptying my PSA vault slowly because they only let you do about 50 at a time. I got 5 packages this week. I don't know what I'm going to do with everything yet. I'll probably sell some, maybe put some in the Fanatics vault, but then hold on to a number as well. But I was listening to Iowa Dave's podcast here, just catching up on some of the ones I missed over the holidays, and he had this essay that he found from the 30s from a collector philosopher, and it just got me, a little sentimental about my collection. And this is a pretty unique time where I'm getting to see all my cards again in one place. And some of them are recent, pickups in the last year. Some have been in the vault for a few years. Some, at least 2 years maybe. And then, others are, somewhere in between. And I'm just going through the pile and figured, this might be a cool way to show some, a walk around. This is, I see like a jersey number 1 for Troy Gloss here. This might be a cool way to show people who, like cards, get to see a lot in one place. And it's going to be wide ranging. Topps black to 71 this year, and PSA 10, tough grades usually. Bowman red to 5, Ben Rice rookie. And then right behind it, his coach, Aaron Boone, rookie 1 of 1. This is a masterpiece edition. So I just thought this might be an interesting video if we just listened to Iowa Dave's podcast together and checked out some cool cards. Maybe it gives you some enjoyment, some mellow stuff to have in the background. I might comment on some cards here and there. I might, mention the story of how I got them, why I got them, what I might do with them next. But I might not. I'm not sure. Right now I'm just trying to go through, and I love reading the backs of my cards. And just trying to enjoy them while I'm listening to the pod. So maybe you will too. I don't think I'll mention value too much. I'll say this, there will be cards under $10 and cards over $20,000 probably. I don't know which video. I'll probably have to break this up because it's going to be a lot of cards to go through. So I don't know which video will have which. And you're going to have to put up with some vintage if you're a modern collector, some modern if you're a vintage collector. Almost all of it will be baseball. This is worth a comment here, just Uncle Jimmy collection, us signed vintage guys. Got to look at him as one of the most important collectors in the hobby. And whenever I can get one of his cards, I jump at the chance. Another cool, we're going from 64 Topps Uncle Jimmy to a random 2002 Topps to 100. But I liked how this came out the year after the 9/11, every player depicted has some type of American flag background and maybe something in their hands, or you can tell that it was bleeding through our culture at the time. Yeah, some of these are from sets, some of these are, that's the last thing I'll say. Some of these are for my sets, some of them are just I've collect the player. Maybe I thought it was a good deal, I had an impulse buy. Who knows? I have a lot of reasons for walking around the hobby, you know. But yeah, all right, let me put that back on.
Sports cards. And whenever I say the word book, I want you to imagine that I'm saying the word card. Or maybe this would be easier. Maybe it would be easier if I just replaced the word book with card. But let's just do it that way. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Benjamin, for writing this, for realizing that we were all degenerates, even 100 years ago, in collecting, but in articulating some things that are worth thinking about now. Here is the first quote that I highlighted. Every passion borders on the chaotic, but the collector's passion borders on the chaos of memories. I'll say that once more. Every passion borders on the chaotic, but the collector's passion borders on the chaos of memories. As he wrote this, he was in the process of moving, and he had all his books in boxes, and they were all on the floor. He was starting to pack them, but he had not organized them yet. You know, he could have organized them by genre, by author, but who knows what, but they were all just sort of scattered, and he's looking down at these. And what he's thinking of isn't what the books are. He's not thinking about what the books, what they're about. He's thinking about himself. He's thinking about what he thinks about when he looks at the books as he paces back and forth in front of his bookshelf. And as he's, looking at the spines of the books and the authors and the titles, he's thinking about what he's put together. He's thinking about this meaning that he thinks that he's creating. And I can't help tie this to my own collecting. From time to time, I think we take inventory of our cards. And while each card has its own character, each card has its own history and its own origin, we are making pairings, we are making stories, we are doing something with our collections where we are creating order out of chaos. We are creating meaning out of a cloud of nothingness. You recognize that. And I think that's really, it's fascinating because I can't speak for you, but me personally, I'm always trying to make something out of my collection. And just when I think that I'm getting there, just when I think I have an idea of what it's going to mean, I pivot, I find something new, I add new meaning to it, I get rid of something, I add, I subtract, I change, I alter, I evolve. But it's never just a card. A card is never just a card, especially when you put it with other cards. One card is a card. 2 cards is a pairing. 3 cards is a collection. And collections are very personal. And certainly, some of us may collect the way others collect. I like to think that my collection is unique, but I know that it's not. Maybe the cards that I have in there, the combination is unique, but I'm sure that there are lots of people out there who think about cards the way I do. And I'm sure there are lots of people out there who think about cards the way you do, or the players, or the sets, or the runs, or the brands, or whatever. That's fine. But we're always making something. So that back end of that quote, right? The collector's passion borders on the chaos of memories, nostalgia. What are we putting together? What is it in the back of our brains rattling around that informs how we make our collections? Only you can answer that for yourself, and only I can answer for myself. But I do appreciate that Benjamin was able to articulate it in a way to make us think about it. Okay, here's the next one. I like this a lot. This one does include the word book, so I am not exaggerating when I say that to a true collector, the acquisition of an old card is its rebirth. I'll read that again. I am not exaggerating when I say that to a true collector, the acquisition of an old card is its rebirth.
I love that quote. I love the first one. This is just a cool card. I don't know why. I don't remember why it's a 5. I think there's a corner issue, but it's cool how they wrote up like the scouting report on Josh Gibson here in the back. Tape measure homers with a powerful stroke. Minimizes whiffs with disciplined approach. I had a pretty sour experience with a former collector friend related to Josh Gibson. But that card, so sometimes I think of him and I just think of that and it makes me negative. But that card I like. This was, and he talks about in this podcast about how, the first quote was the chaos of memories and how that relates to collections. And man, when I read some of the back of these, like the Nomar card or the Poly Walnuts card, and it just takes you back. You just feel like you're flooded with all these thoughts and memories, and it's all because of this little piece of cardboard. Like I made a custom card when I was a kid of Josh Gibson because I didn't think he had any cards at the time. It was probably 2001 maybe. He had a couple at that point. I know that now. I didn't know that then. All right, put that back.
Something happens when a sports card goes from someone's showcase at a show into your collection. Something happens when a sports card that is just sitting on eBay is scooped up from you, scooped up for you, scooped up by you, because you see something in it that the person selling it doesn't see. There's a meaning that you have assigned to it, that I have assigned to it, that we all assign to our cards, that makes us stop when we're on eBay. Think, oh, I need that. I want that. This is mine. This is mine. I need it right now. Or you're going through Cons C and you come across a card that costs, I don't know, like $1.40, but your heart skips a beat when you see it because you know how it fits into your own collection. You know what it's doing within the other cards that you own. They are speaking to each other. This matters, right? You have now given this card new life. What was just part of somebody's inventory, what was maybe just an eyesore or an irritation or an annoyance to somebody else's collection, just something to get rid of because they have too much crap, becomes new when it becomes part of your collection. And not only does that card become new, but your collection becomes new because now you've added a new part to it. I like to think that every new card that you add to one's collection is like rebooting or a facelift for your collection. You have changed the face of your collection. You have changed, I don't want to say the meaning of it, right, necessarily, but you've changed the complexion of it. There's a new element to it. The acquisition of an old card is its rebirth. And there's something beautiful about that. Cards are produced en masse. Some cards are produced in the hundreds of thousands, if not more. And there are some people who get these cards and they immediately recycle them, or they immediately throw them in the trash, or they immediately prepare them to sell. But there are other people who come across this card, maybe one in every 150,000 collectors, who when they look at a certain card, they know what it means. And only they know what it means because it only means something to that one collector. But that's what collecting is, right? We are creating order out of chaos. We are giving a card a reason to exist by adding it to our collection. And in turn, it is giving our collection validation. It is giving us reason and motivation to keep collecting, because now we have affirmation that this card and that our collections go together, and therefore we are not wasting our time. We are building something. We are building something. What is that something? I don't know. What it is for you is different than what it is for me. That's fine. But if we aren't finding these cards, then we are stale. We are just sitting here, and there's no difference between our collection and a paperweight, because both neither of them were to change, right? So when our collections are always changing, when we are finding cards that are left DOA by some COMC or some eBay collector, it reinvigorates us. It helps us keep going. All right. Here's another quote. This is a hard pivot from our friend Walter here, but he's talking about auctions, and he's telling the story about how he once paid too much at an auction. He wanted this book, but found himself in a bidding war. And this obviously was in person, right? There was no internet, no computers, nothing like that at this point. But this was, I believe he said it was 1915, if I remember right. And it was this one time that he said he got out of control in a bidding war, where he wanted this book. It was a 100-year-old book. It was from the 1800s, the early 1800s, and here he was in 1915, going after this book, which, as he notes in his piece, had never been reprinted. So it was an original book from about 110 years earlier. As I'm recording this podcast, it's 2025. So this would be like basically a Cracker Jack card, a 1915 Cracker Jack that I decided that I want. And I have to go after it. And I become almost rabid for it, because I know I'm not going to find it again. He learns a hard lesson because he pays too much. But the lesson is not that he should not have paid it. The lesson is that it was worth it to him, because even 15 years later, as he's writing this piece, he remembers that as being the story behind the book. And that book has given him so much pleasure, so much joy, just by even being able to hold it and to look at it, that he was glad that he made that push. He got into that bidding war. But he also recognizes the danger of auctions. He recognizes how they can get out of control. And so he wrote this. I certainly saw myself in this quote, and maybe some of you will see yourselves in this quote as well in some past auction experiences. Here's his quote. A man who wishes to participate at an auction must pay equal attention to keeping a cool enough head to avoid being carried away in the competition. It is a frequent occurrence that someone gets stuck with a high purchase price because he kept raising his bid, more to assert himself than to acquire the card. And again, he didn't say card, he said book. But let me read that one more time. A man who wishes to participate at an auction must pay equal attention to keeping a cool enough head to avoid being carried away in the competition. It is a frequent occurrence that someone gets stuck with a high purchase price because he kept raising his bid, more to assert himself than to acquire the card. What stuck with me about this quote the most, I think, is this idea of auction not as a means to acquisition of a card that we want, but an auction as competition. That an auction can be...
I pause that. I didn't know this. Posada was a second baseman, converted to catcher. It's kind of cool. These ones I put up here because they're two of my favorites in this bunch. They're actually 1-of-1s, so they're listed as 1 of 50. But the first print, the first serial number in this set, or this parallel longevity. Longevity is a parallel to the base set. There's 50 of them, but the first one has this holographic sheen on it. So it's the longevity holographic, making it effectively a 101, but they were still figuring it out in 1998. We probably should have just had it a 101 and said they made it 150, kind of like the PMG green, how that's the first 10 or first 15, depending upon the sport. But, one of this quote on auction meaning more than just getting the card, it's like trying to assert yourself and compete. And I'm sure you're thinking at times with your own collection, but maybe when you're staring at all the cards I got here that are all over the place, where's the direction? And I won't lie. I think at times I am chasing things other than the card when I make a purchase. Short-term highs, little memories. Certainly sometimes competition, sometimes, seeking potential validation, but also crafting an identity at times. It feels, for something like this, I'm a Negro Leagues collector. It feels weird to not have one of these 70s sets signed. So I didn't even really know about it until a year ago, and once I found it, I thought they were all right, but they're weirdly sized and like a spelling error on Julius. Baseball's Hall of Fame with no possessive apostrophe. So I don't even think they're that great, but I spent money on them because I felt like I had to have them, which maybe isn't the most useful way to think. And I know I've been in late night auction battles, or even this card, this Jeter. I felt like I had to get it in a private kind of deal. I think it was a public transaction on eBay, but I felt like I had to move really fast to get it in case someone else swooped in. And I probably paid a little bit too much. I like this podcast he's doing a lot because it makes you reflect on the inputs beyond the cards to why we're in this hobby and why we spend so much time and money on it. Didn't even realize how many Yankee catchers I have. Posada, Berra, Dickey, Elston Howard. Actually, this might be a cool one to read. The oldest player in Major League history to hit safely. I think he played in like 4 decades. He was in the Negro Leagues in the 40s, late 40s, I believe. Definitely in the early 50s, but 50s, 60s, 70s. I guess that'd be 3 decades. I thought I remember seeing some stat that was about a 4th. Maybe he came back later, and 3 years later. Okay, I'll put it back on.
A way to assert oneself, to win, to dominate, to beat somebody. And in the case of Fanatics Collect, in the case of eBay, in the case of My Slabs or any other auction house, we don't even know who we're bidding against. We just know that we want to win. I'm speaking only for myself here, but there are times where I lose auctions, and I lose way more auctions than I win because I just don't want to pay a certain price. Where I'm disappointed with myself for not going just a little bit higher. Did I even want that card in the first place? And if so, why did I stop? If I want something, why am I not going to go all the way? Clearly here, the sensible thing is to not spend above your means. And that, when I get down to it, is why I stopped. Because I was trying to stay within my budget, and that is important. And no regrets on staying within a budget. but I'm talking about being in the moment. Losing an auction hurts. It hurts because you know what that card could have meant to your collection, and now you're going to know what it means to not have that card in your collection. Sports cards are from sports. People who collect sports cards oftentimes are involved in fantasy sports as well, and that too is a competition. So we know what it means, and we know what it feels like to not win. And to not win an auction hurts. But it does not hurt as much, I don't
20
think,
homers a
as
month.
winning an auction but paying too much. I think that's the flip side of this argument here. And what Benjamin is pointing out is that it is possible to get carried away. And when you pay too much at an auction, when you get so obsessed with either A, winning, or B, thinking that this card is the most important thing in the world at that moment, that you pay too much, I end up resenting the card when that happens. I will pull the card out after I've won it, and it's 6 months later, and I look at it, and yeah, I'm glad to have the card, but if it's a card that I went and paid too much for, that's what I see. I see a lack of discipline. I see a card that exceeded its value in my eyes. I see a card that showed my lack of ability to know when to pull back. And that in itself is really, really frustrating. And it's not the kind of...
This is a reprint, obviously, of the 54 Topps card, but before there were highlights, top 10, you had to read about it with some little gimmick or comic. When I see this, I'm so grateful to have these cool heritage cards, signed by Willie Mays, but it also makes me think, man, wouldn't it have been cool to have Jackie around to make cards like that? I mean, for a lot of reasons, but just small little one in the hobby to have cards like that. Jackie Robinson.
to assign to cards, which I think tells us, in the end, that it's best to stop. It is best to stop because if you do pay too much for a card, it is the cost of the card that becomes more dominant in our brains than the card itself. Okay. Let's get now to the final two quotes here from Benjamin. And these two quotes are the ones that really stuck with me. These last two quotes are the ones that I think really speak to us about the modern state of collecting. One is sort of macro. It's about this idea of who a collector is. And the other one is about ourselves in the place and in the space of collecting. There's a push and pull right now in the hobby between investing and collecting. And oftentimes the argument is that you are one or the other when, clearly, as with anything, there's a gray area. There's an overlap of the Venn diagram. Nothing, or rarely is anything ever black and white. But I also think it's fair to ask the question in 2025 of what is the collector's place in modern sports card collecting? Is there room for the collector in collecting? I think there is, but I also think it's not a matter of, yeah, sure, of course. I think it's a discussion worth having. Where is the collector these days in the collecting?
I don't understand this. See, this is a cool little insert set, and I have a cheater here coming in a second. The Topps Triple Threads does, they take a piece of their All-Star Game jersey and put it in the card, number it to 9. I think there's also a 101 parallel. I have the Trout somewhere. That's a cool card from his first All-Star game. But this says, Glavine declined the All-Star game invitation. This patch is from the uniform Glavine wore at the 06 All-Star game. That's weird. I mean, maybe he just joined, so it's like maybe it's not a game he used. Yeah, worn at, maybe he attended and didn't play. I have to look that up.
Space. Things are getting more expensive. We are getting priced out of basic services such as buying and ripping boxes or rookie cards or singles or whatever else. Oftentimes there is this tendency to say, you know, not everybody can drive a Rolls Royce. Not everyone can eat steak. Sometimes you have to be able to eat a cheeseburger. Sometimes you have to drive a Toyota Corolla. And I think that's a really misguided way of looking at the modern hobby. Because it's not a matter of everyone wants to eat steak. It's not a matter of everybody wants to drive a Rolls Royce. In the modern hobby, a lot of us can't even afford the cheeseburger. A lot of us can't even afford to drive our Ford Pinto. So where does the collector fit? That's the same type of question that Walter Benjamin was asking. And he came to this.
Sorry to keep pausing this, but I thought it'd be cool to look at this. The effort to collect Negro Leagues data obviously paid off in 2024 when MLB decided to honor, Negro League stats, which were incomplete, of course, because of less focus on record keeping from those leagues at the time. But this is saying his career batting average is .372. Well, this card from 25 years earlier, 1999, which, is missing 25 years of research, says his career average was .362. I was staring at this, 29 games, 17 home runs. So that would have been his, you play that forward. Maybe he played 162 games, he gets 80 home runs. But then he had different, less powerful performance later on. But it's just so hard to know. Because even the reporting was questionable. The record keeping, people could have missed something. There was no double checks. I did a big deep dive on Satchel Paige stats, and what you realize is there's just a lot of racism in the reporting. People almost didn't want to say how good he was. Maybe they'd sneak in, 17 strikeouts at the end of the paragraph, but the first, 6 sentences were he was okay or bested by the white pitcher or something. And so it makes you think sometimes those in the 17, maybe it was even higher. Maybe they were missing something. Yeah.
That only in the collector themselves can collecting be understood. And he talks about this idea of public collections and private collections. And it's in private collections that I think he would be thinking about people who are just building their sets. They're not on social media. They're just collecting cards because they like cards. And to him, that was sort of the true value, the true essence of what collecting is. And yes, there are public collections. There are people who are noisier than the rest, who are better at drumming up attention than the rest, who crave that attention almost more than they crave cards, or in his case, books. He doesn't put down those people. He says that some of them build these amazing collections, but they're not necessarily real. The people are real, but the affinity that they have for their collections and our perception of their collections isn't necessarily real. And if we really want to understand the individual item in a collection, an individual book, an individual card, and what those cards and what those books have to do within their hobbies, you need to look into the micro, right, into the smaller collector. And here's his quote: "Even though public collections may be less objectionable socially and more useful academically than private collections, the objects get their due only in the latter. Only in extinction is the collector comprehended. Only in extinction is the collector comprehended." I wish that he was alive so I could ask him about that last line. Only in extinction is the collector comprehended. Because I want to know if he meant individually, when a collector is gone, only then do we understand them, because then we can look at a collection and start to piece together who they were. Or I wonder if he means the broader definition of collector. I wonder if he means that only when the collector, the person who feels like the quote-unquote true collector, and yes, I understand that that phrase is problematic, that when it gives way purely to the public collections, right, to these ones that everybody knows about, when we forget about the little guy, there's a whole idea of collecting change. Does it go away? Does it become something else? It might. Benjamin was a smart person, and he was clearly onto something there. These first few quotes that we've read, I hope have touched a nerve in some way, have made us think about our own collections. But he's thinking about something here as he looks at his books, and as he's looking at the piles and the boxes and on the floor, as he's considering them, putting them back on his shelf and rearranging them. He's wondering about how will he be remembered? How would he be remembered if somebody came across his collection? And I think this is a fascinating question to ask ourselves. Let's say at the National, let's say the National was not about sellers and dealers, about buying cards and trading for cards. But what if there was a different kind of National? And what if at the National, 100,000 collectors got together and they laid out their collections for everyone to see? And nobody could buy, and nobody could sell. And they were protected, nobody would steal anything. But once you laid out your collection, you had to walk away from it. And then over the course of those 5 days, people just walked around and looked at everyone else's collections. And when they stopped to look at your collection, what would they see? What does your collection say about you? What does it say about how you think? What does it say about what you're trying to communicate? That is what I think that Benjamin is getting at. The collector. Only in extinction is the collector comprehended. Only when the collector is no longer there, but their collection is. That is when we can understand the collector and the collector's collection. Okay. Let's move now to the last quote that I wrote down. And it's fascinating to me. I read it and I sort of stopped And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Then I read it again, and then I read it a third time, and it was toward the end of the piece, so at that point I went and I finished it. But then I went back and I read it again. So there was something about this quote that really gave me pause, that caused me to want to think about it, even after I finished reading, and then to share it with you. And here it is. Benjamin wrote, quote, "Ownership is the most intimate relationship that one can have to objects. Not that they come alive in him. It is he who lives in them." Here it is once more. Ownership is the most intimate relationship that one can have to objects. Not that they come alive in him. It is he who lives in them. Even now, as I reread that quote for the 7th time and an 8th time, I don't know which direction to go with it. I don't know what to think about it, but I know that I wanted to share it with you. Put another way, he's not saying that you bring your cards to life. He's saying that you live in your cards. He's not saying that you have created anything in your collection. He says that you are in your collection. He says that the cards that we want, the individual cards that speak to us, that we need to acquire, we see something about ourselves in them. We think that we are acquiring them. We think that we are trading for them because we think that we are in control of our own collections. We think that we are making something grand. We think that we are creating something original. When really, what we're doing is we are putting ourselves on display. And that might be the memory of a team that we cheered for when we were a kid. It might mean a player who represents something that we would like to represent ourselves. We admire them. So in a sense, maybe through collecting them, we are transferring some of that admiration to ourselves. I don't know. This might be a longer topic for a different day. But I think as we wind down, I think it's worth reading the quote for a third time. This was the quote I kept coming back to as I read it. As I read Unpacking My Library, a talk about book collecting by Walter Benjamin from 1931. This is the quote I kept reading, so I think I will share it once more, because I think it's worth thinking about, and I think we need more than a few seconds to think about it. So I'd like to leave you with that. And I'd like, hopefully, this is the last thing that you think about from this piece as well, is this quote. And then maybe down the line, we can talk about it again, either through DMs on Instagram, Iowa Dave Sports Cards, or maybe I just do another episode about it later, or maybe somebody who gets moved by it can come on the episode and we can talk it through together, because I think that might be really helpful. But one last time, here is this final quote from Walter Benjamin. Ownership is the most intimate relationship that one can have to objects. Not that they come alive in him. It is he who lives in them. Thanks for listening to The Shallow End. I will talk with you again next time, whenever that may be.
Hope Dave's okay with me doing that. Thanks to him. Go check out The Shallow End. Great pod. Guess I'll just keep going here. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more. does make me think about how do I live through these cards, using that quote. Some of these, I don't really see myself in. Like this one, it's a cool card. I do like the Topps blacks. Judge is the captain. I feel like I gotta support my team captain. But my El Duque PC, my Jeter PC. Jeter is like a guy who does things right. El Duque, there's a good documentary on HBO, but he fought like hell to get here and performed under the brightest lights at the biggest stage in those late 90s Yankee teams. The Negro League guys, I'm always going to have a soft spot for people who had it rough and persevered and excelled despite that. And, my goal with my collection, at least in part, is to put a little bit of a spotlight on them. Just a small move, obviously, but it's a spotlight they should have had when they were living, or when they were playing at least. Brady, another guy who does it the right way. I'd have more, but this stuff is so pricey.